It's Friday. Good to have you with us on Ed Schultz News and Commentary. Redskins and Packers this Sunday night. I'm going to be right there. So I thought, since my wife and I have moved to Washington, D.C., this will be kind of our present to ourselves, being at the town to go to the NFL game. I took the dive. We're sitting in the front row right behind the Packers. I don't do this very often, but I did it this time, so I'm going to have great seats. The president last night in his town hall meeting finally put a mainstream media thinking and operative Anderson Cooper in his place. First of all, I have nothing against Anderson Cooper, all right? But this was a perfect moment and a perfect response, because the mainstream media in this country constantly regurgitates every bullet point, every angle they possibly can, so they can keep their firearm in this country, and they hide behind the Second Amendment and they make up stuff. And it is a conspiracy. So I've been waiting for this word to get into the conversation in the mainstream media. But the reaction of Anderson Cooper, isn't it a conspiracy, though? You really think it's a conspiracy? Here's the reaction of the president and the exchange.
Is it fair to call it a conspiracy? I mean, well, yeah. A lot of people really believe this deeply, that they just don't. They just don't.
Hold it right there. A lot of people believe this garbage deeply, Anderson, because you tell them that. You let them say it unchallenged. Let me pivot to this. I talked to you yesterday about being a gun owner for years. Guess what? I've been a pilot for years. I got my pilot's license in 1988. I got over 3,500 hours. And you know what I have to do every year? I have to go to the doctor. I have to go to the doctor, and he has to make sure that I'm not crazy. He has to make sure that I'm mentally fit and physically fit to be able to fly an airplane. Why? Because you, the public out there, thinks that everybody that flies an airplane ought to be checked out and be competent. But wait a minute, firearms are different. Why is it that everything in the air is so regulated and everything on the ground isn't? And I understand it, and I have no problem with it, and I know that the government is not trying to keep my feet on the ground. The government is just trying to make sure that there's some checks and balances in aviation, and that somebody who's gone off the rails isn't going to be flying over people and possibly have an accident. That someone who's got a bad heart isn't going to be flying. It's called regulation. It's not called confiscation. And you know what? Air travel in this country is the safest way to travel. You cannot argue with the statistics. And the fact is if we have background checks, there will be fewer people who are a little bit on the edge not owning firearms. And you know what I'm talking about. We have to use politically correct language in dealing with the fact that someone's not mentally competent or should not own or operate a firearm. Why is this so hard? And why is it that little old Anderson Cooper, who's never flown an airplane or fired a gun or owned a gun, buys into this constant rhetoric and media hype from the right-wingers and the gun owners of America who think that Obama's coming to get my guns? Jeez, I better think Obama's coming to get my Grand Caravan. Holy smokes, I had no idea he wanted my airplane. Here's the full exchange, but this was a classic example of how the mainstream media just buys into the crap that's thrown out there by these folks who think their guns are going to be taken away.
Is it fair to call it a conspiracy? I mean, well, yeah. A lot of people really believe this deeply, that they just don't. They just don't trust you.
I'm sorry, Cooper. Yes, it is fair to call it a conspiracy. What are you saying? Are you suggesting that the notion that we are creating a plot to take everybody's guns away so that we can impose martial law
but there's certainly
is
a lot of people,
conspiracy? Yes, that is a conspiracy. I would hope that you would agree with that. Is that controversial?
He never answered the question. He just smiled because Anderson Cooper doesn't know. At the town hall event, the president did something that has never been done before. He reached out to the NRA. Listen to this.
I'm happy to meet with him. I'm happy to talk to him. But the conversation has to be based on facts and truth and what we're actually proposing.
And not conspiracy.
Imaginary fiction in which Obama's trying to take away your guns. Well, the reason, by the way, that the gun sales spike, not just before I propose something, every time there's a mass shooting, gun sales spike. And part of the reason is that the NRA is convinced, many of its members, that somebody's going to come grab your guns, which is, by the way, really profitable for the gun manufacturers. It's a great advertising mechanism, but it's not necessary. There's enough of a market out there for people who want protection, who are sportsmen, who want to go hunting with their kids, and we can make it safer.
That might be the best answer I've ever heard a president give on firearms in this country. The president made the common sense pitch to the American people where most Americans are. Now leave it to Fox News to come back and try to prop Obama up as a gun grabber. They put on Chris Cox, who's the NRA executive director. Now, you heard the first part of that soundbite where the president says he'd like to meet him. This is the NRA's response.
Did we participate in CNN's event tonight? No, we didn't. We were offered one pre-screened question. Megan, I know that you don't send your questions over to the White House, so I'd rather have a conversation with you that's intellectually honest than sit through a lecture and get one opportunity to ask a pre-screened question.
Hold it right there. There's no one of greater authority in this country than the President of the United States. It's not like CNN was pulling some bum off the street and saying, hey, you want to talk about guns? This was a remarkable production and the right thing to do by CNN and the President of the United States. I'm sure the other networks would have loved to have been involved in it. The fact is the president made his case as to why he thinks we need to do these things. And it's not going to inhibit anybody's ability to own a firearm. And I can go buy another airplane today if I want to, because I meet all the healthy standards. The president wants to put $500 million into mental health. That's fantastic. Where's the NRA on that? Oh, that's just part of the gun grabbing measure. Look, there's no stronger lobby in this town, Washington, D.C., than the gun lobby. And there's no easier way to hoodwink a voter than to make them think that the person that they might be voting for is going to grab their firearm. And the president did something monumental last night in addressing all the bullshit that goes with this, the sales job that goes with this. This Chris Cox is nothing but a salesman. And he's in denial of the facts of what's happening in this country and the social changes that have taken place. Here is another interesting deal that popped up last night. The president didn't get heckled. I mean, if these people are so passionate, why weren't they more aggressive on the president? Because they knew the president was right. The president was making the case.